You know, when you come off a mat and your body's completely drained and you feel like, you know, you just ran into a semi or whatever, you know, yeah, I think it feels great.
Alright guys, a few days ago I posted a video entitled Terry Brand's The Greatest Quote Ever. And if you haven't seen that video, it's basically just the clip that was played at the beginning of this one. And just let me read through this quote real quick. So, you know, this came from the video Dan Gable Competitor Supreme, came out in the 90s, I think 1992 or something like that. I think I was in middle school at the time, and I just, you know, was blown away when this documentary came out because it was pretty state-of-the-art comparatively at the time. You know, this is before the internet, so there wasn't a whole lot of wrestling documentaries out there. And like I said, so when this Dan Gable Competitor Supreme video came out, you know, it just took the wrestling world by storm, and everybody was watching it, and had a tremendous impact on the wrestling community. I mean, I've even heard Spencer Lee and, you know, some of the Iowa guys like Jody Strittmatter referred to, you know, when it came out and how they used to watch it over and over again. And so, you know, back to this quote, you know, Terry Brand says, you know, when you come off the mat and your body's completely drained and you feel like you just ran into a semi or whatever, you know, I think it feels great. And first off, you know, the reason that I love this quote so much is that it's just simply badass, right? I mean, and you know, so in this video I want to break down this quote and just sort of explain the mind training strategy behind the quote, and you know how brilliant and amazing it is, and you know, possibly maybe you could add this to your arsenal of mind training techniques that could benefit your wrestling game tremendously. And so first off, if you're not sure what he's referring to when he says, you know, you feel like you just ran into a semi, he's referring to a semi truck, right? And, you know, so basically he's saying, you know, whenever you come off the mat and you feel like you just got run over by a truck, I think it feels great, right? And so let me just break this down, like I said, and explain to you what exactly he means by that and the mentality behind it. So first off, before we even get into the quote, one thing we have to remember is that, as I've mentioned before, and I mentioned this in my mind training program, the brain serves as an interpretation machine. And I'll give you an example of what I'm talking about. So let's just say, for example, the weather's really cold outside and you have two people. One of those people loves the cold weather. Just, you know, there's people out there that love winter, they love the snow, they love the cold, they love wearing winter clothes, whatever it is. And then there's other people that, you know, tend to despise the cold weather. You know, they're summer people, they like the warm weather, they like shorts, they like sandals. And so when it's cold out, they're, you know, just basically miserable. So what happens with these two people is that when it's cold outside, their brain is going to interpret that cold weather as either good or bad. And so if you love the cold weather, you would be saying, oh, this is so amazing. Oh, it's snow. Look at the white snow. That's winter wonderland. And I'd love this. And I love going outside. Let's go for a walk. I'm going to put on my coat and scarf and hat and boots, and we'll go out and enjoy this amazing cold weather. And then, you know, if you're the person that despises cold weather, you're going to say, I hate this weather. It's so cold. I don't even want to go outside. I just want to stay in here in the warm heat and just watch TV and, you know, drink something hot and, you know, something along those lines. And so my point is just that, you know, the cold weather is the situation, but the brain is interpreting that cold weather differently for two different people. And so the person that loves the cold weather, it's something that's great. Like I said, it's something to be enjoyed. And for the person that despises the cold weather, this is just something miserable and painful that they just don't even want to really deal with if they don't have to. My point of that example is just that, you know, I'm trying to give you an example or an illustration of how the brain serves as an interpretation machine. It's not necessarily that the cold weather is good or bad. It's simply how the brain interprets that. So like I said, for some people it's good, for some people it's bad. And so back to this quote. So as I mentioned in my mind training program, the only reason that anyone does anything that they do in life is for one of two reasons. And that is for the acquisition of pleasure or the avoidance of pain. And so in regards to this quote by Terry Brand, you know, most people view reaching physical exhaustion in training or competition as painful, and therefore it's something that is to be avoided at all costs. And And so what Brands, or probably more accurately Dan Gable, did was he consciously changed the way that his mind interpreted the pain of physical exhaustion into something that was actually pleasurable. Like he says, you know, when I feel like I've come off the mat and my body's completely drained, I feel like I just got run over by a semi, I think it feels great. So he's making this physical exhaustion something that becomes something that is to be desired rather than avoided. And so this quote is something reminiscent to what I had a buddy who was in the Marines, and of course I'm an Air Force guy, but he said that when he was in the Marines and they would be doing physical training or PT, their drill sergeants would say, pain is weakness leaving the body, right? And what that does is that turns pain, which obviously nobody wants to experience pain, we try to avoid pain for the most part, but it turns pain into something good, which is like pain is weakness leaving the body. So therefore, when you feel that pain, that's a good thing because that's the weakness leaving the body, right? And so Brands sort of does a similar thing here with his interpretation of physical exhaustion coming off the mat. And so what this does is when Brands is reaching the point of physical exhaustion where most people are going to take their foot off the gas, Brand takes the onset of physical exhaustion as something to be desired instead of something to be avoided. And so therefore, when he starts to feel the onset of this physical exhaustion, this is a good thing that he really enjoys. So he puts the hammer down and goes even harder. And obviously, this is going to serve as a tremendous advantage because he's able to push the pace of the match in pursuit of that desirable feeling of physical exhaustion. And when his opponent starts to hit that point of exhaustion as well, in his mind mentally he starts to back off because this physical exhaustion is equated with pain, and so therefore most people want to avoid pain, and so therefore most people are going to tend to back off when they start to feel physically exhausted. But since Brands has switched his interpretation of physical exhaustion to something pleasurable, he then will accelerate when he starts to feel the onset of that physical exhaustion. And then of course when his opponent starts to back off, you know, that will result in his opponent mentally breaking. And as Dan Gable is known for saying, once you feel somebody break mentally, it's all over. And you see this happen with the Brands twins over and over again in a number of different matches against high-level opponents where they break their opponent mentally because of the physical exhaustion, and then that allows them to turn up the pressure and allows them to basically score at will. And so like I said, when this video came out, I was in middle school and I just remember watching it over and over again and just thought that it was such a great quote and a great mind strategy that if you can find a way to implement this into your way of thinking and into your mental training arsenal, you know, I firmly believe that this will help you take your wrestling to the next level. And so just to kind of recap, like I said, Brands took something that is, you know, commonly seen as painful and something to be avoided, which is physical exhaustion, and he switches the way that his brain interprets that into something that is pleasurable and therefore should be pursued and acquired. So he takes that physical exhaustion and makes it something good, like, hey, I love to feel physically exhausted. I think it feels great. So therefore that allows him to push beyond the wall of physical exhaustion to where most people aren't willing to go. And by doing that, it allows him to then break his opponents mentally and in turn ends up dominating them in the match. And so, like I said, if you can do this same type of mental training strategy and take that idea of physical exhaustion or feeling physically tired and make that something good and something desirable, then you too can implement that into your training regime. And again, you can break people mentally just like the Brands twins used to do. And, you know, wrestling is a sport that doesn't necessarily reward talent as much as hard work. And if you're able to outwork people and you can push yourself further physically and mentally than most people can, wrestling's a sport that will reward that. The bottom line, guys, is that if you want to wrestle with the intensity of the Brands twins, then it is essential that you start training your mind. So that about does it for this breakdown of the Terry Brands greatest quote of all time. If you found this video helpful or insightful at all, I would encourage you to check out my mind training program. Links in the description. Like I said, I have a ton of just different techniques, strategies similar to this one that will help you to take your mental training to the next level and in turn take your wrestling to the next level. Until next time, I wish you nothing but the best of luck. Stay sharp.